As you said, it's about funds, not about fun. I really haven't come across an example of a company that basically says, well, we're fine, just go ahead. We're just buying your services. That's going to be cool. So this is not the climate we're in at the moment. We've seen a lot of downsizing in terms of budgets with big, even global players who are present in Germany. Budgets are being cut. Corporate security departments are being downsized, sometimes to nil. What we have to consider and what the perspective of the client is. The client obviously wants to have an ROI, and we're trying to play the numbers game with the clients, especially in the economic climate that we've got at the moment. That's really what counts.
What are the biggest challenges that you've experienced when trying to convey the value of threat intelligence to businesses?
Well, first of all, in Germany especially, we're facing an intellectual environment that is fairly averse to the idea of strategic thinking in general and of the notion of intelligence in particular. So there's, for example, not even a proper German translation for the word intelligence. Yeah? So there's different interpretations and such. So the problem we're facing here is that we don't have a kind of a sort of established forward-thinking outlook type culture in many organizations, including universities, in the public discourse, in the media, even in specialized media and so on. So the same, of course, extends to corporations we're targeting. And that is certainly an uphill struggle all the time, because essentially what we have to do is to start from scratch by explaining the whole idea of why it is important to kind of install some forward forecasting mechanisms when we try to pitch our products and so on. And this is definitely something where we always have to start with ABC, more or less.
Right. That's why I think this conversation is going to be kind of interesting today, because it's going to be interesting to hear what some of the challenges that you guys are experiencing over in Europe, and then how you're having those conversations with management teams. And so I think there's still going to be a lot of lessons here for maybe a more North American audience that is still trying to convey the value of threat intelligence in a more corporate setting. Moritz, I might come to you now. What have been some of the consequences that you've seen as a result of management not appreciating the value of threat intelligence, and perhaps also what are some of the consequences when you're trying to work with clients when you don't necessarily have that place in the C-suite, in the boardroom with decision makers?
I mean, first up, you have to consider that the American intelligence industry is about 4 billion euros in total. In Germany, we talk about 3 million. So it is less than a fraction of what is actually happening in the United States. And this is just a small picture of the entire problem which we're facing. From a cultural standpoint, you guys in the United States are really like, you know what CIA does, NSA, what is decision-making for government agencies, how do corporations have their decision cycles. And in Germany, this is not really culturally established at all. So even from a military standpoint, we have leaders transitioning, what you had a podcast about as well, from the military to leadership positions. There's not this real understanding of intelligence-based decision-making. So what we have to do is, first, we have a bigger problem with scaling. Intelligence software is somewhat expensive. And if you only have so many clients, because the market only gives so much away, you have to look way deeper into the economic aspects of your overhead as a service provider. That is one of the biggest challenges we face. The second thing is we have a lot of explaining to do, starting from how profound decisions made, back to the topic of what is actually intelligence and what is the difference between a newsletter and our service, because not even this like basic understanding of intelligence is established here. Following this, we have started a campaign to just educate. We start to educate like German middle-sized businesses. We have free webinars, we have free seminars, and we just try to convey the idea of intelligence. And that is something where, what especially in this current situation in a global matter, this is really important, generally spoken. So yeah.
So it sounds to me, just to summarize what you're trying to say there, like here in the States, we have, a huge military industrial complex with tons and tons of intelligence coming in from the not the corporate sector, the government sector. And so there's more of the mindset, there's sort of the lingo. So people are a little bit more apt to kind of accept this new function coming into their organization. Whereas from what it sounds like, what you're saying is the language doesn't even exist yet, because there's not that government infrastructure whatsoever to kind of come in. So it's even when you're coming into the sales process, you're starting even at the beginning. There's a little bit of an understanding in North America, whereas on Europe, people this concept hasn't even really started to register. So you're starting at very much square one when you're coming into the boardroom and trying to pitch your services.
So, I mean, I think what's the biggest difference is as well, is we always start from a really special pain point. A customer comes to us and says, yeah, we have this problem. We need to have it fixed somehow. They don't even understand why they have this problem. They don't have this the understanding how they could solve the problem. There's just an understanding, yeah, the guys are planning for risk here based in Berlin. They do something with information. I have no idea. They solve problems for big corporations. Let's just call them up. And that's something which happens from time to time, where we then explain, good, there's actually a solution to some problems which you thought before were not possible, right? And this is how we enter the market.
Yeah, I want to just put a pin in that just for a second with the tactics and techniques, because I'm enjoying this conversation about the consequences, and I do want to get to the pain points there. So I want to dive in a little bit more in terms of, and we talked a little bit about this in our pre-call a couple of weeks ago, about some of the consequences that you guys have seen as a result of German companies and European companies in general not having this sort of intelligence function. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, European countries, there are some European countries who do have that intelligence function, obviously. In general, you can say that in the Anglo-Saxon world, and partly also in French, the presence of intelligence, the concept of intelligence, is way more publicly known and is accepted even. So it is normal to understand the need of some sort of intelligence backup for all sorts of operations. In Germany and in some other European countries, the problem is, as we laid out already, to have the basic notion, the basic idea of why intelligence is necessary. Now, how can this be lacking? For example, on a very general level, the lack of proper threat intelligence, of directed and tailored threat intelligence, bespoke indicator sets that inform intelligence, can of course mean on a very concrete level that corporations spend a lot of useless resources on potential threat areas that they have identified just willy-nilly, more or less, just because somebody thinks it's important, but they haven't really made the analysis. They haven't really come up with a proprietary indicator set that really answers to their intelligence needs for that particular company. So once that is done, it really helps to save resources and direct the resources that companies do have available into the right areas, especially in the economic climate that we currently have in Europe and in Germany. We're looking at declines. The German economy is decreasing at the moment. We're struggling really. And so it is really important. And we've seen that just recently when we were approached by a potential client who had a very specific intelligence requirement in Africa, in East Africa. They were having a project there. We won't go into details, but the project was basically producing a value of roughly $1 million per day. So there was some kind of, say, civil war in the area, and the front line was very close by. And for that potential client, it was very important to understand, to know what would actually be the next steps. Where could the front line move? Is the opposition getting stronger? Which commander of the government forces makes what sort of decisions? That's a very specific intelligence need. Now, we can definitely contribute to these kinds of intelligence pictures, and that's exactly a very good example of how a very appropriately and proprietarily designed indicator setup can really assist that company in saving millions of dollars per week. Even one day of operation on top is basically already bringing back the investment for the intelligence structure. If you look at that from that perspective, so that's a benefit of this sort of intelligence.
Another thing is as well, what we have noticed mostly is that most companies who don't employ a culture of intelligence usage, they will not know the risk involved. When I was in West Africa, in a country where there was just civil unrest, just in this moment when my plane landed, I had talks with German companies operating in this region. They were not aware. There was just no understanding of the risk involved, and they were caught by surprise. Same thing would happen to Germany with the energy crisis because of Ukraine. Now of Israel, everybody was sort of overwhelmed, but us Germans especially. COVID hit, Suez Canal channel. I could name a dozen different examples where the German just forecasting failed miserably. And this is just something what needs a long-term cultural change. But what we have seen as well, we have had a lot of talks with different clients over the last months, and the pain of the German industry gets so intense. There's no other way for them other than to adopt. And this is what we've seen.
All right, guys, that was super interesting answer. I was furiously taking down notes to the whole point, and there's a bunch of different directions that I could take this conversation next. But I kind of want to steer it back to, Moritz, what you were talking about previously with pain points that a lot of your clients have and the specific questions that they have. When you're talking to managers at a lot of these businesses, what are the type of pain points that they're coming to you with, or the type of information that they're looking for?
So most of the time, the entry is during a concrete crisis. For example, during this crisis in Sudan, we were approached by a multi-billion-dollar organization, or euro organization from Germany, in regards to battle damage assessments at the end of the day, where we tried to understand what is the conflict in this exact neighborhood, which was controlled partly by Russian mercenaries. How do you gain access, etc., and so forth. So these are like really specific problems we get approached for, and then we actually show them this entire world of profound decision making. This is one thing. The second thing is regulatory responsibilities. Some companies try to minimize their regulatory footprint or their exposure to legal risks by just adhering to international standards. And most companies then just realize, oh, you need threat intelligence and travel risk management. That's a good thing. Yeah, you should implement that. And that's how we get in the talks as well. It's just from a kind of regulatory standpoint. And the third thing is just put a price tag on it. If the most vulnerable supply chains need to be protected somehow, and you need to be able to understand what could threaten these processes. And if the company gets hurt at this exact point, they will try to look into their network of their security responsible positions on how could they have predicted this. In Germany, we always say, how could we have not known this? Yeah, it's called intelligence. That's what we do.
Are there any kind of things that you see as very, very important, but like when you're talking about it with clients, they just don't see the value of, and maybe that's like a bad place to lead with, or are there any kind of topics like that?
Yeah, so sometimes what happens from time to time, if we mostly we get one or two people in the organization who understand what we're doing, and they are big fans. Then they approach the senior leadership of the company, and they're like, yeah, this is a good thing, but we need to integrate this somehow. We need this cultural transformation within our own organization to be able to use this information. I don't know how this organization has made decisions before, but if they tell me they need to rework the entire decision making within your organization, I'm wondering whether just like throwing out cards and just putting a finger on one of them, it doesn't make any sense. So that is one of the biggest challenges we face. And in other things, it's just a lack of understanding of strategic foresight. It's we always call it a radar for risk radar to some extent, or we just try to use some acronym like some other words for the things we do. But if there's no real understanding, we have to start the basics. How does leadership work? What is that? And as a non-military military community or like country, there is no leadership taught for many people. I mean, look at the United States, look at Israel, where you have like, or look at Switzerland. Switzerland is great.
Or the UK.
UK. Everybody has like a really well-defined culture of military leadership, which just requires intelligence, not Germany.
Malte, I want to turn this back to you now. You were talking and you had a great example of showing the ROI of some of the services with the mining operation example that you had. One thing that I'm thinking about too is, when any conversation that I have with management, it always comes back to return on investment. Every dollar that we're putting out has to show some return to either shareholders or the owner of the company in some way. And so I'm kind of curious to hear from you as to how do you go about showing that ROI to management? Is it and you had a great example there where it was just dollars and cents, but do you have difficulty providing that kind of information, or is that something they're looking for?
Yeah, it can be difficult sometimes if the ROI comes somehow down the road. Yeah, if there's not an immediate return on the investment, if the company can't really see the numbers changing from day one of implementation of a possible implementation of some measure, some tool, some intelligence tool. So usually there needs to be a very palpable, something that you can actually grasp, some benefit that really immediately comes with it. So the argumentation we're usually taking, the road that we're usually taking, is by showing if you implement this measure, you can save on, for example, a number of different other tools that you've used before. You can consolidate, for example, resources that you've had before, and we're trying to play the numbers game with the clients. As I alluded to before, especially in the economic climate that we've got at the moment, that's really what counts. I really haven't come across an example of a company that basically says, "Well, we're fine. Go ahead. We're just buying your services. That's going to be cool. Let's see how it pans out, and then we look at renewing the contract maybe." So this is not the climate where we're in at the moment. So we've seen a lot of downsizing in terms of budgets with big, even global players who are present in Germany. So budgets are being cut. Corporate security departments are being downsized, sometimes to nil. Just some recent examples of big global players who are also in Germany. We've seen that. So it's a difficult market. It's definitely a difficult market, and it's not the easiest of times. So the cost argument is certainly something we always have to prepare in anything. And so that's number one.
Another thing which we always do is we look at certain vulnerabilities. I have a good example from this. I was approached a couple of months back, or more than a year ago, actually. There was a company based in Mexico, and the company need to ship their materials to German industry client throughout Mexico, going eastbound, and they had to use one big harbor called Veracruz. Maybe some of you guys know it. And every time the company tried to ship something and there was some sort of unrest within the local population, for some reason, the roads were closed and the shipment could not make it in time. And then we did some analysis. We found out the shipment, the local population uses this really vital highway as some sort of negotiation piece with the local government. They tell them, we don't want to have any abductions by the local cartel. If that still happens, we will block the road until you help us. And this happens with political unrest. This happens with crime, with local. There was one time where like a local mayor was corrupt or whatever, and they were just angry, and they just blocked the highway, and the company could not deliver the services. So just by using an analytic competence and having the right data, you can understand these processes. You cannot really predict them, but you can have a better understanding of the risk involved, and they actually mitigate the risks within this process and actually have less vulnerability. And the way how we sell it to the clients is, okay, you guys lose on this vulnerability every year, fictive number right now, like 20 million euros. If we have a better understanding and have better measures, you guys will only lose 10. And then the number games start to play again in our favor. And this is something which I can recommend to everyone, is intelligence is only relevant if it actually fixes something. If it doesn't fix anything, or if it isn't of value to this really extent for a business case, that's just another newsletter which is really interesting, but not really relevant at all.
The leverage that we're using really comes down to what's the profit, what's the actual financial benefit. That's really the bottom line of it. Yeah.
I love that answer, guys. And I found that so fascinating with the examples that you provided. I've had this conversation with other security professionals from time to time, and a lot of the times they'll be talking about, we want to be seen as just an advisor, and they don't want to get into that ROI calculation. And I think that's great when interest rates are at 0% and the economy is booming personally. But when we're in the economy that we're in right now, with interest rates now at spiking 6-7%, with profits in decline, with revenues going down, management teams are looking to raise funds and cut spending wherever they can. And so if you're just coming in and like, I have a nice newsletter, like you said, do I want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a newsletter? I don't know. But if you just told me, like with your example, I'm going to save $10 million on, my supply chain, keeping that moving, well, it makes it very easy to justify the spending on threat intelligence. And I know it's not always the easiest, but when you can find those examples, because the leverage that threat intelligence teams can have with those one or two examples a year where you save the business so much money, the ROI can be enormous if it's presented properly.
Yeah. Rob, we really love our job, and we really love what we do. We love dealing with intelligence. I've been working in intelligence for years. I've studied intelligence in London. And so, Moritz, I mean, you're also passionate about intelligence, about the procedures, about developing the process, about implementing, running intelligence through an intelligence system. That's all great. But as you said, it's about funds, not about fun. So that's really been thinking about this for like 2 minutes. And that's exactly what we have to consider, and what the perspective of the client is. The client obviously wants to have an ROI, but it certainly helps when they're dealing with a provider who really likes what they're doing. So because I think that's what. It is always the same effect. That's what always makes you good at what you do, if you like what you do, if you have fun at what you do. And we've chosen this particular field of intelligence provision, processing intelligence for as a passion, really. It's almost a hobby to me, and that's what we're trying to convey. What people often say about us, we kind of burn for what we do.
And that's another really interesting topic about sales. Stories sell 100%. So sometimes it's not about. I could talk about KPIs and how many minutes a client reads through our stuff, and that we better than the competition, and the so and so percentage of return of investment. But if you want to catch someone who has no contact with intelligence at all, it's always good to tell a good story. And we've actually done that on some events where we're like keynote speakers for the German industry, and we just got their interest by telling some really sometimes funny, sometimes weird, and sometimes just really interesting and adrenaline-driven stories. And at the end of the day, they got a better understanding of what we do. There was no real monetary benefits to the story. I didn't tell them, oh, that client saved so much money, because that was not the point. The point was about telling this is actually possible. And sometimes, I hate to say it, coolness factor sells a bit too. Sometimes. It always depends on the decision maker, but yeah.
All right, gentlemen, we're coming up on all the time that I promised to steal from you today. What's the main takeaway you want listeners to remember from our conversation?
Do it.
Yeah. So the main takeaway is, especially in this economy and with underdeveloped markets, numbers sell. Having a good ROI, having good stories to tell what is actually the benefit to the client, and not being afraid to explain a lot. We spent a lot of our time just doing educational stuff, just like this podcast, where we try to teach other people what we do and what's the benefit at all. That is, from this perspective onwards, the advice I could give.
And how can listeners learn more about what you guys are up to at Plan for Risk if they want to reach out?
Yeah, so planforrisk.com, 4 with the number, so plan, then the number 4, and then risk.com, everything written together. We do have a blog as well. We do free webinars to different topics, especially for the German industry. If someone is actually listening from Germany, that would be great. But you others out there as well, you get great insights into the German industry if it's interesting to you guys. We do have great access to them. And industry is small, right?
Yeah, obviously it's our brand new website that's just gone online, and of course we're also on LinkedIn, and we're pretty regular with our newsletters. They are driven by events, actually. So we've got a crisis newsletter that comes out whenever there's a major event that we're trying to highlight. And we're giving out free examples, for example, for work and analyses. This is how you can find out and sign up to our basically newsletter. That's a good way to find out more about us.
All right, I'll be sure to include all those resources in the show notes. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you so much. Bye.